Red and blue lights shattered the quiet night. Two officers thought they had caught an easy target, a black couple driving a luxury car in a wealthy neighborhood. They demanded ID, expecting fear. Instead, they just handcuffed a senior DOJ prosecutor and a decorated FBI special agent. Big mistake. The rain had just begun to fall, a fine, misty drizzle that cast a glossy sheen over the winding, tree-lined roads of Great Falls, Virginia. Inside the cabin of the 2024 Mercedes-Benz S-Class, the atmosphere was one of quiet exhaustion. The digital clock on the dashboard read 11:45 p.m. Arthur Davis let out a long, measured breath, loosening the silk bow tie at his collar. At 42, Arthur was a man who carried the weight of his profession in the subtle lines around his eyes. As a senior prosecutor for the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, his days were spent dismantling systemic corruption, prosecuting hate crimes, and holding law enforcement agencies accountable for constitutional violations. Tonight, however, he was just a husband driving his wife home from the Federal Law Enforcement Foundation's annual gala in Washington, D.C. Beside him in the passenger seat, Chloe Davis was quietly slipping off her designer heels, replacing them with a pair of comfortable leather flats she always kept in the footwell. Chloe, 39, was a supervisory special agent with the FBI's Washington field office. For the past decade, she had spearheaded joint task forces taking down organized crime syndicates and domestic terrorism rings. She was wearing an elegant emerald green evening gown, her FBI credentials and service weapon secured safely in a lockbox bolted beneath her seat, though her secondary badge remained tucked inside her leather clutch, resting on her lap. "I swear," Arthur said, his deep voice breaking the silence, "if the Deputy Attorney General asks me to play golf one more time, I might actually have to learn how to swing a club." Chloe laughed softly, resting her head against the cool leather of the headrest. "Don't do it. It's a trap. Next thing you know, you'll be spending your weekends in pastel polo shirts talking about your handicap." Arthur smiled, steering the heavy sedan smoothly around a sharp bend on Georgetown Pike. The road was secluded, flanked by sprawling multi-million-dollar estates hidden behind wrought-iron gates and ancient oak trees. It was their neighborhood. They had bought their home here 3 years ago, a quiet sanctuary away from the relentless grind of the capital. But as Arthur glanced in his rearview mirror, his smile faded. A pair of headlights had appeared behind them. They were aggressively close, illuminating the raindrops on the rear windshield. "We have a shadow," Arthur murmured, his tone shifting instantly from relaxed husband to observant attorney. Chloe didn't turn around. Her training dictated otherwise. She merely adjusted the side mirror on the passenger door to catch a glimpse. "Ford Explorer, police interceptor," she noted calmly. "He's been tailing us since we turned off Route 7. 3 miles, Arthur said, his jaw tightening slightly. "He hasn't run his lights, just riding the bumper, running the plates." They both knew exactly what was happening. Despite the tailored tuxedo, the designer gown, the luxury vehicle, and the top-tier government clearances, they were a black man and a black woman driving through a predominantly wealthy white suburb late at night. It was a script they had both lived through before, long before they had federal badges to shield them. "Do you want to pull into the driveway?" Chloe asked. They were less than a mile from their house. "No," Arthur said firmly. "If they're looking for a reason, I'm not bringing them to our front door. I'll keep exactly to the speed limit. Let's see what they do." 30 seconds later, the darkness of the road was violently fractured by a strobing burst of red and blue LED lights. The siren chirped, a sharp, demanding burst of sound that cut through the quiet hum of the Mercedes engine. Arthur sighed, his hands returning to the 10 and 2 position on the steering wheel. He engaged his right turn signal and smoothly guided the heavy car onto the narrow shoulder, shifting the transmission into park. He turned on the interior dome lights, illuminating the cabin brightly, and rolled down all 4 windows. A standard protocol for anyone who knew exactly how nervous cops could get approaching tinted glass in the dark. "Stay relaxed," Arthur said quietly, resting both hands flat on the top of the steering wheel where they were clearly visible. "Always am," Chloe replied, her hands resting openly on her lap over her clutch. Her pulse hadn't elevated a single beat. In the side mirror, Arthur watched as the driver's side door of the police cruiser opened. Officer Greg O'Connor stepped out into the drizzle. O'Connor was in his late 20s, built like a linebacker, walking with a distinct, broad-shouldered swagger that Arthur had seen 100 times in deposition rooms. His right hand was already resting heavily on the butt of his sidearm. From the passenger side of the cruiser, a second, older officer, Officer Rick Stanton, emerged, hanging back near the rear quarter panel of the Mercedes, shining a blindingly bright tactical flashlight into the rear seats. O'Connor approached Arthur's window. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't state his name or his department. Instead, he leaned in slightly, the beam of his flashlight sweeping aggressively over Arthur's tuxedo, stopping briefly on the gold watch on Arthur's wrist, before panning over to Chloe's emerald dress and diamond earrings. "Whose car is this?" O'Connor demanded, his voice laced with heavy, unmistakable suspicion. Arthur looked directly into the blinding light, his expression entirely neutral. "Good evening, officer. This vehicle belongs to me." O'Connor scoffed quietly, a sound that barely masked his disbelief. He tapped the roof of the Mercedes with his heavy metal flashlight, a deliberate show of disrespect. "You folks lost? You're a long way from the city." "We are exactly where we are supposed to be," Arthur replied smoothly, his baritone voice perfectly steady. "Now, officer, could you please tell me why I was pulled over?" O'Connor leaned closer, his jaw thrust forward. "I ask the questions here, buddy. Hand over your license and registration." Now, Arthur did not argue. He knew the law intimately. He knew the statutes regarding traffic stops, reasonable suspicion, and probable cause better than the officer standing outside his window. He also knew that asserting those rights on a dark, isolated road with a highly aggressive officer was often a losing game for a black man, regardless of his Ivy League degree or his federal authority. "My license is in my wallet, in my back right pocket," Arthur stated clearly, narrating his movements. "My registration is in the glove compartment. I am going to reach for my wallet first." "Just get it," O'Connor snapped, his flashlight remaining pinned directly on Arthur's face. Arthur slowly reached into his tuxedo trousers, retrieving his slim leather wallet. He extracted his Virginia driver's license. Behind the license, neatly tucked into a hidden sleeve, was his solid gold Department of Justice badge and his federal identification card. Arthur consciously chose to leave them hidden. He slid only the civilian driver's license out and handed it through the window. He wanted to see exactly how this department operated. He wanted to see how far Officer O'Connor would take this gross overstep of authority without the magic shield of federal immunity forcing him into compliance. O'Connor snatched the license. He glanced at the name. Arthur Davis. The address listed was barely a mile away. O'Connor's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "This address is on Fox Run Lane. You expect me to believe you own a house in the Fox Run estate? I expect you to read the legal document issued by the state of Virginia, officer," Arthur replied, his voice chillingly calm. "Now, I will ask you again. What was the moving violation that prompted this stop?" O'Connor's face flushed. "Failure to maintain the lane. You swerved back there." It was a textbook lie. Chloe, sitting silently in the passenger seat, mentally catalogued the falsehood. Pretextual stop, she thought. No dashcam corroboration. highly likely based on racial profiling. Her FBI mind was already writing the internal affairs report. "I see," Arthur said simply. O'Connor turned his attention to Chloe. The beam of his flashlight hit her directly in the eyes. "What about you? Let's see some ID." Chloe didn't flinch, didn't blink. She looked past the blinding light, making direct eye contact with the man behind it. "Officer, in the state of Virginia, a passenger in a vehicle is not legally required to provide identification during a routine traffic stop unless they are suspected of committing a crime." "Am I suspected of a crime?" O'Connor gripped the window frame, leaning in menacingly. "Look, lady, I don't need a law lesson from you. I told you to hand over your ID, and I respectfully decline," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a calm, authoritative register that had commanded rooms full of hardened cartel informants. "If you are citing my husband for a lane violation, write the citation so we can be on our way." "Don't tell me how to do my job," O'Connor barked. He took a step back, gesturing sharply to his partner. "Stanton, keep an eye on them. Their hands stay where you can see them." O'Connor stomped back to the police cruiser with Arthur's license. Inside the cruiser, the glow of the mobile data terminal illuminated O'Connor's angry features. He aggressively typed Arthur's license plate number into the National Crime Information Center, NCIC database. He hit enter, expecting a list of warrants or a suspended license to pop up. Instead, the screen flashed a solid, bright yellow. A high-level security warning appeared. "Restricted record. Do not approach without supervisor authorization. Contact S. Marshal's Service for verification." Because Arthur prosecuted high-level cartel leaders and violent white supremacist gangs, his personal information, home address, and vehicle registration were shielded under federal protection protocols. Only authorized federal personnel with top-secret clearance could access his actual records. To a local patrol cop's computer, it looked like a massive anomaly. Officer Stanton leaned over from the passenger seat, his brow furrowing as he read the screen. "Greg, what is that? I've never seen that code." O'Connor's pulse spiked. In his inexperience, he misinterpreted the warning entirely. "Restricted record? No, that's a ghost plate. Sovereign citizens use them, or it's a stolen car with scrubbed VINs. These people are faking it. The address, the car, everything." "Wait, Greg," Stanton said, sudden unease settling in his gut. "It says to call a supervisor. Let's just call Sergeant Kessler. If we're dealing with a stolen vehicle, we need backup anyway." "I don't need Kessler to handle two grifters playing dress-up," O'Connor growled, slamming his hands against the steering wheel. "They're lying to us, Rick. He's evasive. She's refusing to ID. We're pulling them out." O'Connor unlatched the door of the cruiser and stormed back out into the rain. The situation had just crossed a dangerous threshold. Back in the Mercedes, Chloe saw O'Connor's aggressive stride in the side mirror. She noticed his hand had moved from resting on his weapon to actively unsnapping the retention strap on his holster. "Arthur," Chloe said sharply, her tone entirely professional. "Condition yellow. He's escalated. Retention strap is undone." "I see it," Arthur said tightly. O'Connor arrived at the window, his face contorted with rage. "Step out of the vehicle, both of you, right now." "Officer," Arthur said, his voice ringing with absolute authority, "I strongly advise you to take a breath and explain the legal basis for demanding we exit this vehicle." "Legal basis? The legal basis is a restricted, fraudulent license plate," O'Connor yelled, drawing his taser with his left hand while keeping his right near his firearm. "You are driving a vehicle with scrubbed plates. Now unlock this door and step out before I smash the glass and drag you out." Arthur didn't panic. He slowly reached over and unlocked the doors. "I am stepping out," he announced clearly. He pushed the heavy door open and stood up into the rain, towering over O'Connor by 3 inches. "Turn around and put your hands on the roof of the car," O'Connor shouted, moving in aggressively. Stanton rushed over to the passenger side, opening Chloe's door. "Ma'am, please step out." Chloe stepped out gracefully, her flats splashing softly in the wet grass of the shoulder. She looked across the roof of the car at O'Connor, who was now forcefully kicking Arthur's legs apart and grabbing his wrists to wrench them behind his back. "Officer O'Connor," Chloe said, her voice cutting through the rain like a steel blade. "You are about to make the biggest mistake of your entire career. You are assaulting a federal prosecutor. Let him go." O'Connor laughed harshly, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "A federal prosecutor? Sure you are, lady, and I'm the President of the United States. Hands behind your back, buddy." The metal cuffs snapped loudly around Arthur Davis's wrists, locking tight in the cold night air. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting closed echoed loudly over the steady rhythm of the rain. Arthur Davis stood perfectly still against the slick, wet roof of his Mercedes, the cold steel biting into his wrists. He did not struggle. He did not raise his voice. He simply allowed Officer Greg O'Connor to exert his physical dominance, knowing that every single second of this interaction was being recorded by the patrol car's dash cam and the microphone clipped to O'Connor's uniform. "Spread your legs wider," O'Connor growled, kicking Arthur's left ankle with the toe of his heavy tactical boot. "I'm going to search you for weapons." "I am unarmed," Arthur stated, his voice a low, steady rumble that carried no trace of fear, only a chilling, absolute composure. "But I will advise you, Officer O'Connor, that you are currently conducting an illegal search and seizure in direct violation of the Fourth Amendment. You have no probable cause for an arrest, and your pretext for this stop was entirely fabricated." "Shut your mouth," O'Connor snapped, his hands aggressively patting down Arthur's tailored tuxedo jacket. "You don't get to talk. You don't get to play lawyer tonight. You're driving a vehicle with scrubbed plates in a neighborhood you don't belong in." O'Connor's hands moved down to Arthur's trousers. His fingers brushed against the slight bulge in Arthur's right front pocket. It wasn't the civilian wallet he had pulled from the back pocket earlier. This was different. It felt heavy, solid. "What's this?" O'Connor demanded. He shoved his hand roughly into Arthur's pocket and pulled out a rich, black leather bifold. "Those are my credentials," Arthur replied evenly. "I strongly suggest you open them." O'Connor sneered, stepping back slightly so the beam of his flashlight could illuminate the object. He flipped the leather wallet open. The heavy gold shield caught the glare of the flashlight, gleaming brilliantly in the darkness. It was a massive, intricately detailed badge. Above it, sealed securely behind a thick plastic window, was a federal identification card bearing Arthur's stern photograph, the official seal of the United States government, and an encoded smart chip. O'Connor squinted through the rain, reading the bold black lettering printed across the ID card. "Department of Justice, Arthur Davis, Senior Prosecutor, Civil Rights Division." For a fraction of a second, the sheer weight of what O'Connor was holding seemed to register. The air in his lungs caught. The Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, the exact federal entity responsible for investigating and prosecuting police officers for excessive force, unlawful arrests, and constitutional violations. But panic and pride are a volatile combination. Instead of stepping back, instead of apologizing, O'Connor's ego forced him to double down. His mind, deeply entrenched in his own biases, simply refused to accept the reality in front of him. "Nice try," O'Connor laughed, though the sound was noticeably thinner, more desperate than before. "Where did you buy this?" "Amazon." "You think flashing a fake novelty badge is going to get you out of a felony charge? Impersonating a federal official is a federal crime, buddy. You just dug your grave a whole lot deeper." On the passenger side of the vehicle, the dynamic was unfolding entirely differently. Officer Rick Stanton had unholstered his taser and was pointing it towards the ground, his eyes darting nervously between Chloe and his partner. Chloe stood in the wet grass, her emerald evening gown plastered to her legs by the driving rain. She looked utterly unfazed by the weapon, her posture radiating an intense, authoritative command that Stanton had never encountered in a civilian. "Ma'am," Stanton said, his voice trembling slightly, "I need you to turn around and place your hands on the hood of the car." Chloe did not move. She fixed her gaze directly on Stanton's eyes. "Officer Stanton," she said, her tone sharp, precise, and completely devoid of warmth. "My name is Supervisory Special Agent Chloe Davis. I am attached to the Washington Field Office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My husband, whom your partner is currently assaulting, is a senior federal prosecutor. You have precisely 10 seconds to intervene, or you will be named as a co-defendant in a federal civil rights lawsuit that will bankrupt you, strip you of your pension, and put you in a federal penitentiary." Stanton froze. The color drained completely from his face. The absolute certainty in Chloe's voice was terrifying. It wasn't the frantic yelling of a suspect trying to talk their way out of a ticket. It was the cold, calculated warning of an apex predator giving a warning before striking. "I need to see your ID, ma'am," Stanton stammered, lowering the taser slightly. "My credentials are in my clutch, sitting on the passenger seat," Chloe instructed clearly. "I am going to reach into the vehicle, retrieve the clutch, and hand it to you. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Stanton whispered, his confidence entirely shattered. Chloe moved deliberately, ensuring every motion was slow and telegraphed. She reached into the dry cabin of the Mercedes, picked up the small leather bag, and handed it across the roof to Stanton. Stanton fumbled with the clasp, his hands shaking. He opened the clutch. Inside, sitting atop a compact makeup mirror, was a heavy leather credential case. He flipped it open. The iconic gold shield of the FBI stared back at him, flanked by a top-secret clearance identification card with Chloe's photo. Stanton felt his stomach drop into his boots. It wasn't fake. He had seen enough federal credentials during Joint Task Force briefings to know the intricate security holograms and the distinct weight of the real thing. "Greg!" Stanton shouted across the roof of the car, his voice cracking with pure panic. "Greg, stop! Let him go!" O'Connor, who was in the process of aggressively shoving Arthur toward the back of the cruiser, whipped his head around. "What? Rick, get her in cuffs. They're using fake badges." "They aren't fake, Greg," Stanton yelled, waving Chloe's FBI credentials in the air. "She's a Fed. He's DOJ. We messed up, man. We messed up bad." "Shut up, Rick," O'Connor roared, his face flushing crimson. "They're lying. Dispatch, this is Unit 412. I have 2 suspects in custody, requesting transport. Unit 412, do not transport." A new, booming voice interrupted over the radio clipped to O'Connor's shoulder. "This is Sergeant William Kessler. I have been monitoring your NCIC queries. I am 2 minutes out from your location. Secure the scene and do absolutely nothing until I arrive. Acknowledge 412. Stanton grabbed his mic. "Acknowledged, Sergeant. Hurry." O'Connor stared at his radio, then at Arthur, who was looking back at him over his shoulder. Arthur's face was utterly calm, but his eyes promised total destruction. "Like I said, Officer O'Connor," Arthur murmured over the sound of the radon. Every single word, the agonizing seconds stretched into an eternity for Officer Greg O'Connor. The torrential rain beat down on the sleek hood of the Mercedes, washing away any lingering illusions of power the young officer held. He stood awkwardly, gripping the collar of Arthur Davis's soaked tuxedo. The heavy steel handcuffs remained securely locked around the federal prosecutor's wrists. Neither Arthur nor Chloe spoke. They simply waited. Headlights violently pierced the darkness as a Ford Explorer patrol SUV roared around the bend of Georgetown Pike, its emergency lights painting the wet trees in chaotic strobes of red, blue, and white. The vehicle braked aggressively, slamming into park directly behind O'Connor's cruiser. Before the engine had settled, the driver's side door flew open. Sergeant William Kessler stepped out. A 20-year veteran, Kessler had survived the political tightropes of modern policing by possessing a sharp mind and an incredibly low tolerance for incompetence. He wore a heavy rain slicker, his jaw set in a furious line as he surveyed the catastrophic scene. He saw a luxury Mercedes. He saw a black woman in an elegant gown standing calmly in the rain. And, to his horror, he saw his junior patrolman physically detaining a black man in a tailored tuxedo. Kessler marched directly toward O'Connor. "Sergeant," O'Connor started, his voice defensive. "I caught these two running scrubbed plates. They're claiming to be feds, handing out fake tin." "Shut your mouth, O'Connor," Kessler barked, his voice carrying the terrifying weight of absolute authority. He turned to Officer Stanton, who was visibly shaking near the passenger side. "Stanton, report, right now." "Sergeant," Stanton stuttered, stepping forward with the leather credential case. "The female passenger. She's Supervisory Special Agent Chloe Davis, FBI. Her credentials are legitimate, sir. I ran the badge number through dispatch on my encrypted channel. It came back immediately. Top secret clearance, Joint Terrorism Task Force." Kessler closed his eyes, exhaling a sharp breath. He took the FBI credentials from Stanton's trembling hands, verifying them with a quick sweep of his flashlight. He then turned his devastating gaze back to O'Connor. "And the driver?" Kessler asked, his voice dangerously quiet. O'Connor swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. "He gave me this." He handed Arthur's wallet to the sergeant. Kessler opened it. The gold Department of Justice shield gleamed. The ID clearly stated, "Senior Prosecutor, Civil Rights Division." Kessler recognized both the authentic credentials and the name. Arthur Davis had recently made headlines for dismantling a corrupt narcotics unit, resulting in the federal indictment of 6 officers. Kessler knew exactly who was standing handcuffed in the freezing rain. "Uncuff him," Kessler ordered, his voice laced with venom. "Sergeant, he was swerving," O'Connor weakly tried to argue. "I said uncuff him right now, or I will take your badge and your gun," Kessler roared. O'Connor's hands shook violently as he fumbled for his keys. He stepped behind Arthur and released the heavy steel bracelets. Arthur brought his hands to the front, rubbing the red indentations on his wrists. He adjusted his wet shirt, his face remaining a mask of impenetrable calm. He looked directly at Kessler. "Mr. Davis, Agent Davis," Kessler began, his tone deeply apologetic. "I cannot express how profoundly sorry I am. This was a catastrophic failure of judgment by my officer." "A failure of judgment?" Arthur repeated, his deep baritone cutting through the storm. "Sergeant, your officer initiated a pretextual traffic stop based on racial profiling. He lied about a moving violation. He unlawfully demanded identification from a passenger. He ignored a restricted federal NCIC flag, misinterpreted it to fit his biased narrative, and escalated to physical assault and unlawful detention." Arthur took a step forward. "He didn't just fail in his judgment, he committed a series of federal offenses." Chloe walked around the Mercedes, her heels clicking softly, and smoothly retrieved her FBI credentials. "Sergeant," Chloe said, her voice icy, "secure Officer O'Connor's body camera footage immediately. If a single frame goes missing, the Bureau will add destruction of evidence and obstruction of justice to the pending indictments. Kessler nodded rapidly. Yes, ma'am. O'Connor, go sit in my vehicle. Now. O'Connor opened his mouth, finally realizing the magnitude of his career-ending mistake, but no words came out. He trudged toward the SUV. Mr. Davis, I will personally ensure O'Connor is suspended pending a full internal affairs investigation, Kessler promised. Arthur slid his DOJ wallet back into his pocket. I appreciate your prompt arrival, but internal affairs won't handle this alone. Come Monday morning, your chief of police will receive a formal preservation letter from the Department of Justice. We will be auditing this department's traffic stop data, arrest records, and use of force reports for the past 5 years. If Officer O'Connor felt comfortable doing this to a federal prosecutor in a tuxedo, I shudder to think what he does to a black teenager in a hoodie. Arthur turned, opened the passenger door for his wife, and got into the driver's side. He started the engine and pulled smoothly away, leaving the flashing police lights behind them. Inside the car, the silence was heavy. Are your wrists okay? Chloe asked softly. Arthur looked at the red marks. I'll be fine, he said quietly. But Monday morning is going to be a very bad day for the Great Falls Police Department. When power meets accountability, the truth always comes to light. Arthur and Chloe Davis proved that a badge doesn't give you the right to break the law, especially when you pull over the people who enforce it. What did you think of Arthur's calm takedown and Chloe's intense FBI stare-down?